Ladies and gentlemen, aloha, and welcome back to Conservation Voices for the PrimateCast. I'm your host, Cécile Sarabian, and this podcast is the number 49 in our series. At the beginning of September was held the biggest conservation congress in the world, the IUCN World Conservation Congress. This edition, entitled Planet at the Crossroads, was hosted in Honolulu, Hawaii, at the Convention Center. So let's go back in time with a foretaste of some of our IUCN encounters.
What is this? Is this a breathalyzer?
You're eating chocolates, but that's fine. So first, just name, nationality, affiliation, position.
Affiliation position. Okay. I'm Sheldon Planovich from the U.S. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the Coastal Program Coordinator.
I'm Michelle Bogardus. I'm from the U.S. I also work for Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm a team leader for all the biologists in our office that work on Maui, Nui, and Hawaii Island issues.
Favorite place on Earth?
Dude, you're just like straight in on that. Nihoa Island and Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, hands down.
Haleakala National Park on the island of Maui.
Favorite species or organism?
The trapdoor spider, which is a giant spider endemic to the island of Nihoa. Very friendly and furry.
The Hawaiian petrel, which is a seabird that is endemic to the main Hawaiian islands and breeds on the islands of Hawaii, Maui, Lanai, and Kauai.
Great. You can join.
You should join in.
My favorite is a forest bird species called the aniani au. It's found only on the island of Kauai. I think it's all of Hawaii's littlest songbird. It weighs only as much as 4 pennies or 10 paper clips if you take that into your hand. That's how little it is. It's as bright yellow as a lemon drop flittering through the trees.
Oh, you guys.
And it sounds like a squeaky wheel, kind of like a,
Yeah.
Love it. Aniani
Aniani au.
Favorite conservationist? Sorry.
Oh, God. She's like straight in on it. I like E.O. Wilson. I like Jane Goodall.
I like Jane Goodall too.
I like all of the above, but my favorite is Sheldon Planovich.
Yes.
I like Sheila Conant for everything she's done for Hawaii's forest birds.
That's a good one.
The most urgent place or species to preserve?
Oh, they're all in Kauai.
Oh, God. The whole world, like just functioning ecosystems throughout the entire world, that's the most urgent.
I think that's the problem, is that we can't just pick a single place, otherwise we lose all sorts of biodiversity. So it's not just picking a place, it's picking ecosystems that we have an opportunity to do good work in.
So what is your sustainability tips? Something you do on a routine or daily basis that you think has a positive or at least not a negative impact on the environment?
I drink bird-friendly coffee.
I never use disposable plastic things, and I shame everyone around me when they do.
Lights. I hate lights. So artificial lighting, off. There are no lights on our house. There are blinds on our windows. I encourage all of our neighbors to do the same thing because you have no idea the impact of artificial light on ecosystems, even in urban areas.
Turtles.
We hang all our clothes to dry, so we're not using the dryer and all the electricity that goes in that.
You're such a hippie.
All right. Best part of IUCN World Conservation Congress 2016.
You!
Just the general good energy and good vibe surrounded by a bunch of people who care about the world and who want to make the world a better place.
Getting people here that I think knew our message before but had to be here to be convinced. I think, most of us are already all on the same page, so it's just sharing ideas. But when we get those few people here that maybe aren't quite as convinced, and then we change their minds up by being here with so much good energy, oh my goodness, that's
true.
That's cool.
I think there's been a lot of exposure to the Hawaiian public about conservation issues because the Hawaiian press is reporting on this news on a regular basis, way more regularly than usual, and to all sorts of outlets people who wouldn't be hearing about it. So I like that the repercussions go far and way far beyond the walls of the conference.
I agree.
Yeah.
So that's a taste of how our mini interviews were conducted for this introductory podcast, because there will be much more to come. And actually, we interviewed much more delegates from this Congress because it gathered more than 10,000 participants from 192 countries around the world. So to help me out, I'm joined here in the studio by the PrimateCast host, Dr. Andrew McIntosh.
Hey everybody, good to be here. And Seal, so you've been jet-setting all over the world for these different conferences. We just came back from the International Primatological Society and American Society for Primatologists joint meeting, and you went off to Hawaii now for this thing.
Yes, after the IPS-ASP meetings, well, I had a crochet by California to visit UC Davis, and then I went to this massive congress, the IUCN World Conservation Congress, because I thought that's a very good opportunity. It's held only once every 4 years, and this time was in Hawaii. I knew I would be in the US.
Yeah, it was great timing, and definitely something that, from Kyoto University, our program's really happy to see our students going out to things like this.
I'm very grateful, actually, to the leading graduate program, PWS, Primatology and Wildlife Science, for supporting this trip.
That's awesome.
Among what came out of this Congress, like some big decisions were taken. One of which is the creation of the largest protected area in the world, which is the Papahanaumokuekea Marine National Monument expansion, because actually it was Marine National Monument before, a protected area, but Obama just at the launch of the Congress decided to quadruple the size of this protected area, which makes it the largest marine reserve on Earth.
That must be a really symbolic thing as well for having the conference in Hawaii and having Obama's involvement as well.
Yeah, exactly. Among other very famous and contentious actions or motions that have been proposed at the Congress, one of which was called Motion 007. It was almost like Mission Impossible, as this motion
Nothing's
proposed...
impossible for 007.
Yeah, so that's why maybe it passed. The motion was a closure of all domestic ivory markets.
Remember when that came out, you were posting about it as well.
Yeah, because I was in the room.
Yeah,
the most contentious, because talks went on the first day after midnight. Delegates walked out of the room and they decided to close the discussion the next day. Finally, the motion was approved. So.
And so what was I guess some of the people who walked out were delegates from Japan and South Africa, I believe it was.
And Namibia was also an opponent of this ban.
Right.
So the next day, they came back with about 20 amendments to propose, trying to have exceptions in this global ban. So, basically they wanted to avoid the ban, saying mainly that their market was very well regulated, so they didn't feel concerned, as for Japan, for example. Or Namibia or South Africa said that their population of Africa's savanna elephants were rising on the rise, so they don't see why they should be included in this in this ban, and they say that like their market is very well regulated. But we all know that if you allow it in one spot, then that's an easy way to smuggle ivory as well.
I know that Japan is one of the largest markets in the world, if not the largest domestic market in the world for ivory.
Just behind China, yes.
So and that was going to be my question: were China involved in the talks there as well?
Yeah, so China positioned itself along with the US. Along with some European countries, including France, that didn't position themselves so far, but they all agreed to take a move and to go towards banning their domestic market. So this was a big move, particularly from the largest consuming country. So then if others don't follow...
yeah, it's always problematic.
But we will have a specific podcast on this issue very soon, so watch out.
Okay, yeah, so we'll look forward to that. And I just to bring some of the listeners to a historical podcast here, we also have a podcast interview with Dr. Tomoaki Nishihara from a few years ago, who is also, he worked for the Wildlife Conservation Society and has done a lot of work within Japan as well, trying to protect the forest elephants, because people are not really so aware on the ground here, and that's one of the reasons why the consumption is so high. I think people just aren't getting the message that they need to get. So I hope this can help in that regard.
Right. So among other motions that have been proposed at this Congress was the motion 009, which is the ban of captive breeding facilities for hunting lions in South Africa.
Oh, right. Yeah. Hunting lions has been kind of big in the news this past year.
Yeah, this topic will also be part of a coming podcast because we had the chance to be able to interview an activist in this regard, Dr. Andrew Venter.
Mm-hmm.
He's the CEO of Wildlands, and he's also the executive producer of a documentary depicting this issue called Blood Lions. And he also initiated a campaign called Youth for Lions, where youth people of South Africa are taking position on this issue and letting the government know that they don't want this to happen in their country. Yeah. And as we are now the 3rd of October, the CITES meeting, or the COP17, the convention of the party, which is taking place in Johannesburg currently, is touching to its end. And there has been decisions taken on those motions.
Right.
One of the role of CITES is to, for example, uplist or upgrade the protection level of the species by putting them in different appendices. So for elephants, for example, if we wanted this motion of banning the trade of ivory, then that means, for example, putting all elephant species into Appendix 1.
Right.
Which they aren't currently. There are still the populations of Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa that are listed in Appendix 2.
Right. The one where the support for banning the domestic trade is actually the least or the most opposed.
Right. And no later than yesterday, October the 4th, the proposal to uplist all African elephant species did not obtain the 2/3 majorities required from the parties, which means all African elephants still do not obtain the strictest possible protection. And similarly, the lions were not uplisted into Appendix 1, which means they didn't obtain the strictest protection possible.
Right.
Which means that the trade of lion bones, lion tails, and other used for traditional Chinese medicine will still be allowed.
Right.
But the good news are that the Barbary macaques, along with the African grey parrots and the pangolins, which is the most trafficked species, in front of tigers or elephants, and we might forget about them, but they obtained the Appendix 1 listing. So.
Yeah, I think it really goes to show just the plight right now for this group of species. And again, pangolins have been in the news a lot recently too, over the past 6 months or a year. So it's really nice to see, the world taking action on this one for sure.
Yeah, finally, yes.
Joining the charismatic megafauna, the pangolin.
Right. So, yeah, beside all those motions and decisions that were taken at the Congress, it was also very nice to see thousands of those delegates from all around the world coming
10,000 is an incredible number.
Yeah, the biggest Congress I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so cool to see them most in Hawaiian shirts and their traditional outfits.
Soaking in the culture.
That was great. And I remember I think it was the opening ceremony. So they couldn't fit everybody in the same room. Mm-hmm. So we were dispatched in different rooms. So it's a screen.
Sure.
And one of the chair proposed the participants to hug each other. So to hug your neighbor from each side.
The traditional Hawaiian greeting?
I don't know. I thought maybe everyone will go with his or her home greeting. Mm-hmm. So I went over my neighbors and I thought I'm going to give a hug. And I don't know why, but I'm sure they were not French. But they both kissed me on each cheeks and I was like, wow, that was not what I was expecting. But that's just for the anecdote. So I did not try to hug all the participants, but instead I tried to know who they are with the recorder.
Bradley Christopher Duvall, American from Honolulu, Hawaii, volunteer.
Salmanov Ruslan, Azerbaijan, Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources.
Denise Okuyama, Peru, South America, guest.
Ian Lifshitz, Indonesia. Sustainability Director for Asia Pulp and Paper.
Zaran of South Korea, International Convention Center, Jeju.
Daru Bosu, Ghana in West Africa, Deputy National Director for Arusha, Ghana.
Anita Verghese, India, Keystone Foundation.
Al, Hawaii, State Department of Public Safety.
Wulan, Indonesia, WCS Indonesia Program, Species Conservation Specialist.
Seth Horstmeyer, American, Director of Global Ocean Legacy with the Pew Charitable Trusts.
Matsushima, Japan. Same the Digon Campaign Center.
Kim Harrison, Oahu, Lighthawk, volunteer.
Jayan Sarnaik, India, the Applied Environmental Research Foundation.
Moi, Georges Sibassou, secrétaire exécutif de l'initiative de collaboration transfrontalière Grand Virunga, donc entre la RDC, le Rwanda et l'Ouganda, basé à Kigali.
Patrick, Swiss, IUCN, software engineer.
Angel Kirkup, American, member of the public. I live here in Honolulu, so I just came to look at the exhibits.
All right. In addition to those delegates, we were so lucky to be able to hear from the legacy of those three giant conservationists, which are Dr. Sylvia Earle, Dr. E.O. Wilson, and Dr. Jane Goodall.
Mm-hmm. Three names you might have heard of.
And surprisingly or not, I don't know, they were the three and the only three biologists turned activists that got complete standing ovation from the room of like thousands of people.
Right. I mean, it almost seems like it would be obvious, but given the stature of those people and I think the passion with which they approach the subject matter as well. And as you say, maybe it has something to do with their origins as biologists and having that connection to nature from the beginning.
Right, which show their power to inspire people, I think, even conservationists themselves. But as we are also biologists, and as those people have been able to explore different places and species through their work and their passion, my first question to the delegates was a very simple one. What's your favorite place on Earth? So I'm asking you.
Okay. Well, it's I want to say it's easy. It's not that easy, but I have an answer that I have to give now that I've actually been there once. And I think for many reasons it becomes apparent, especially in the context of a podcast on conservation. But Antarctica. I was really lucky to have the chance a few years ago, 2013-14 summer campaign, to visit as part of the French polar mission. There we were doing some research on Adelie penguins. And of course, going up to that moment, I was reading all of the historical literature, not all, but a good proportion of this historical literature, the Shackletons, the Scott Amundsen stuff, all those crazy adventures that people had, Bird, and getting really excited about it. Of course, my mission was in the year 2013, so a little bit less dramatic than that. But I think it's impossible to arrive at a place like that and not feel incredibly passionate and inspired immediately, just with how different the place is, how immense the problems are facing the planet, and how a place like that really just fast forwards everything in your mind, because that's one of the two places in the world where, and the other being the polar environment, where the things that we start to see changing the world happen first, and so that and also the way that the animals live down there really is tooth and claw kind of thing, where fitness, in reproduction and, being the main components of conservation are just immediately apparent for those animals. So it's easy to see how one little stepped on bug in Homer Simpson's Visit to the Past can really have immense changes in the future. But Antarctica.
Wow.
And you?
Me, I would have to split, I think, between two places. Joker.
No more jokers for me.
The first one would be just, I guess, very close to my heart, which is the garden of my aunt in Normandy, in northwest part of France. A garden where I grew up, and every time I come back to France, I feel I need to visit. It's the garden where I started to play outside, and to play with the dog of my aunt, which was my best friend, I guess, by the time. So I don't know, we created invented little stories to explore the surrounding of this garden and everything. So
does it still exist?
Yeah, it still exists.
Pristine form?
Yeah. Well, the dog is not here anymore, unfortunately, but the garden is still there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
So this is one, and the other one is also, I don't know, specific places to me. It's a small village in north of Madagascar called Antsoa. That was my first trip, I think, to Africa, to Madagascar. And I was welcomed in this village as a girl traveling alone. And to make things easier, the chief of the village, which was half from Yemen and half from Madagascar, said I was his daughter.
Oh, wow.
And it was very funny to see that no people were questioning this at all.
Right.
They've never seen this girl for 20 years, but then that was it. I was his daughter. And so everybody welcomed me, and I just had so great moment there. It was just so, I don't know, so emotional. So I'm very attached to those.
It's amazing to
places.
see, it doesn't really matter where you are on the planet, just that connection with people.
Exactly.
And you don't know where it comes from or why it arises in some cases and not others, but it just can really, really be touching.
Yeah, so, well, that's our take, but let's hear about those delegates now.
My motherland, it's near capital of Azerbaijan, near Baku, not so far from Baku. The name of my region is Salyan.
Oh man, that's impossible. Baja California.
Sumatra Island. Beautiful, rich landscapes, animals, wildlife. It's a stunning location.
Guatemala.
Las Vegas.
Shimla? Congo?
Congo,
Kinshasa?
Home. I visited Ethiopia once. I love that country. The culture, the people, everything about the country is nice. And the diversity across the north and south. Yeah.
Desert of Peru.
I like Okinawa island best.
I have so many. I'm new to Hawaii, and so I'm discovering these islands, and they're so beautiful. It might reach my number one pretty soon.
Yosemite National Park.
That's gonna be hard. Favorite place? What is it? I don't know. There's so many places. Probably Gunung Gede, Bogor, the first mountain I ever climbed. So
Probably the beach, a beach. Have many favorite beaches, but probably too many to name.
My home.
This is the best weather in the world, Honolulu, Hawaii. There's no place better. I flew all around the world for free, and by far this is the best place in the world to live.
So we had some really enthusiastic Hawaii supporters here. So Cecile, what was your verdict? What was your take on? That was the first time you were in Hawaii?
Yes, that was my first time in Hawaii. And unfortunately only in Oahu. It's different than what I thought or what I expected. I was expecting something maybe a bit cliche and maybe a bit more developed. But it happened to be, I don't know, a very laid-back, different place. But the culture and then the people were amazing. And I love this, very laid-back attitude. And you would just see people in the streets of Honolulu just walking with their swimsuits and surfboards
sure.
in their hands.
Wait, and that's not cliche?
Well, maybe it's a bit, but I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, sounds great.
And I don't know, it's part of the spirit as well. Jumping from a favorite place to a favorite species or organism. Sometimes those two are intimately linked.
Yeah.
As we just described.
we saw that also in our last podcast we did with the primatologists.
Yeah, right.
That often the species they study is really what drives their affinity to certain places or... Yeah,
where they study them. Yeah, exactly. So what would be your answer to that? Favorite species or organism?
Species. Guys, yeah, it's really hard. Ever since I was really small, and my mom constantly tells me this story, I would be able to spend hours and hours with my plastic animals, and they could be farm animals or they could be forest animals or whatever, but I spent a lot of time with them. Growing up over the years, I have become kind of a primatologist and, as I just mentioned, branching off into seabird research as well. I have to say that the Adelie penguin is definitely one of the most delightful animals to observe in its natural habitat. Ridiculous animals, beautiful at the same. On land and in water is so different. An animal that can be have such a difference in its degree of grace, say, on land versus in the ocean. But that's really spectacular. And I also as somebody who studies ecology of parasites, I think that that's another group of animals that kind of has a bad rap. Obviously should have for many reasons, but there's also really cool things we can learn from the lowly worm, not in the ground, but in the gut. And I think maybe one thing that people don't necessarily think about so often is even in the context of conservation, understanding the diversity of parasites in an ecosystem can really take us a long way into understanding the health of that ecosystem in itself as well. And so in some cases, we'd like to see a healthy diversity of those types of organisms as an indication of kind of a healthy functioning of, just life in general. So I gotta give a shout out to the worm.
Right.
And how about you?
Like my first answer would be linked also to one of my favorite places, Madagascar, but not only. And I would say chameleons.
Oh yeah.
I just think they are so cool. And I'm not sure they are so much understood yet as well. Like their physiology and their ability to just change their camouflage all the time with their rolling eyes. So
yeah.
I know, since Madagascar, I got a fascination for this species.
When I was in West Africa, in Ghana, doing my master's research on black and white colorless monkeys, some local village kids tried to sell me a chameleon.
Oh, no way.
Of course. It's been unfortunate. I didn't buy it.
Great. You preferred your plastic animal toys.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't arrange it in the way that I wanted, so...
And then more recently, I think the naked mole rats. I just thought that would be so cool to study them. And this came out actually at Lincoln Park Zoo, so not in their natural habitat, but they have a few. Mm-hmm. I just watched them for like an hour or so, and I was thinking of like, the different kind of infection risk avoidance experiments I could do with them.
Well, and naked mole rats also bring you one step closer to E.O. Wilson as well, because as one of the the early or most illustrious researchers focusing on the social insects, the eusocial insects, the naked mole rat happens to be one of the only mammals which also is eusocial.
Right, but I'm not sure E.O. Wilson can be a postdoc advisor now.
Well, I'm not sure.
Anyway, so beside our response, let's hear what others have to say.
Probably anything in the ocean. Any kind of fish, mammal, coral, seaweed, anything of that. Anything to do with the ocean.
Vicuñas in Peru.
Tiger. Grizzly bear.
Laysan albatross.
I like gazelles. Also other species like I don't know.
That's a tough one, but I love trees.
The Sumatran elephant, the wild elephant. We actually have one out there, but you can't see that. It's stunning, beautiful Sumatran wild elephants.
Hornbills.
Je préfère les gorilles. Oui, ils sont très intéressants.
Does dog count? Dog? Okay. Dog.
Digon.
So my first love is Sumatran rhinos, but now my new love is manta ray.
In Hawaiian, it's called the kolea bird. It's a Pacific golden plover. It migrates from Alaska to Hawaii. When it gets cold in Alaska, it comes to Hawaii. And it's just an amazing bird because it travels so many miles, risks its life to fly over the Pacific Ocean to also come to the best place in the world.
That's a good question. I've always liked kind of the big cats, cougars and things like that.
Elephants, not because I'm African or coming from Ghana, but I think because of also when you take the elephant as an iconic species, you end up taking care of not only the elephant but every other thing that is within the environment of the elephant.
So we've heard a lot here about megafauna species and less about like less charismatic or emblematic species.
Right, like my parasites. And, I think it's always, it's not always important, but it might be interesting to mention for people who have not seen it, like the Ugliest Animal Awards, because that started as kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to think about conservation as well for some of the less charismatic animals out there, like the blobfish. Your naked mole rat is also on the list. And the, things like the proboscis monkey, which sure it has a big nose, but that's a beautiful animal.
Well, but I would say the same for the naked mole rats. Like sometimes the most ugly, or I don't know, it makes them super cute as well.
Very impressive, anyways. And a colleague here, Julie, mentioned that her tick would have been for the tardigrade, which is also a really cool animal, radiation resistant, desiccation resistant, basically death-proof thing that we've sent into space successfully and retrieved. So all kinds of really amazing things out there.
Right. But unfortunately for them, they don't have, I don't know, I have the feeling they don't have the same chance as those very charismatic mammal, most often, species, who have sometimes a protector or an angel just taking care of their conservation and raising awareness of the public, such as we know for chimpanzees, for example, with Jane Goodall,
right, or
elephants or tigers or all those, very iconic species.
Yeah, the panda in WWF.
Right.
I mean, you should point out that obviously the whole idea of charismatic megafauna, at least in principle, is that protect the largest animals in an environment, thereby protecting kind of the largest portion of the ecosystem, which would act as, they act as umbrella species. But, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not that actually does work for the majority of species. So, but that's for a different podcast, I think.
Right. But so the transition here is from those favorite species to favorite conservationists. So
yeah, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Beside being still, I think, inspired by those conservationist giants who just dedicated their life, or at least part of their life and career, to conservation, such as Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, E.O. Wilson, who, by the way, are respectively 82, and 87 this year.
Yeah.
Which just makes me think, what the hell am I doing at 27, So it's very encouraging at the same time and challenging. So this still inspires us all, I think. But beside them, and also closer to my experience, I think I would just name one person for now, who is Dr. Vahabzadeh. Is the father of ecology in Iran. He translated so many critical books of those people, for example, to be able to spread their message to a part of the world that doesn't have necessary access to it. And he also recently initiated a big movement in Iran, the Nature School movement, which is basically to be able to bring to the new generation a sense of what nature is and a sense of wilderness by putting them in a context where they can experience nature. And as you mentioned earlier, that's very critical, I think, for child development. Well, there has been studies on that. So
you came on the scene in Iran with Jane Goodall Roots and Shoes program, I guess 3-4 years ago now.
Right.
And so you, how much have you seen just in that time, or was there already gaining momentum for these types of initiatives there, or how much has changed in those 4 years?
Back 4 years ago, to my knowledge, there were no nature school. The project, I think, was in place, but it wasn't created. And after the first nature school in Iran, then it started to grow like mushrooms.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, and those are obviously that's a great example of a place that needs these kinds of things to be taking off. We talk about it, from our desks or armchairs or whatever all the time, but the amount of impact, I think, just that we can have in our everyday lives is a lot smaller than people who are actually living in those kinds of environments. So it's great to hear.
And I would like to add about those this new generation of conservationists out there. I would like to add 2 more names, actually. One of them is Naftali Honig, that we also had the opportunity to interview for the PrimateCast earlier, I think, last year. And he's an eco-activist working for law enforcement in Africa. And I think that's an aspect of conservation that is, quite new, at least in the past decade. And that's something that wasn't there before. So
yeah, it absolutely looks like definitely one of the hardest parts of it. So seeing things through on the ground.
Right. Well, it's for sure tough, but I think they are doing a great job that we should acknowledge more. And another young conservationist that we also had the opportunity to interview for the PrimateCast, he's Yufeng Gao. He's a Chinese young conservationist who is now, I think, taking his PhD at Yale University in the US. But he also dedicated his master thesis to the issue of ivory trade in China, Asia, and Africa.
And I think, so the interview that you talked about with him being on was one of the student conferences in conservation science that you did. And that probably would have been the Australia?
Yeah, this was in Brisbane, Australia.
And so you visited last year, you went to three.
So
I don't remember anymore. But maybe it's worth mentioning those are also, at least from your perspective, and they seem to be a great opportunity for young conservationists to get together and see what the beat is.
I would recommend them to any young conservationists out there. What about you?
Well, mine's kind of simpler and less directly connected. I like thinking about these plastic animals that I used to always play with. At the same time, there's always joined with watching amazing things on TV. And so I don't know if, he's necessarily, the first one, is necessarily a conservationist mainly or firstly. But anyways, David Attenborough has been really inspirational for me getting interested in nature and nature conservation, biology in general. And I think probably for so many people, some of their first experiences with the most exotic places on the world were narrated by him. So I think that's pretty special. And a little more directly related to conservation, as a Canadian, all of my fellow Canadians will be familiar with the name David Suzuki, who has been in the Canadian. This is also in relation to broadcasting and developing public awareness and teaching people about nature and science. Through a TV program that's had been going forever, probably still is, The Nature of Things, with him as a host. And I think just, those people like him who just kind of tirelessly devoted to getting word out, trying to inspire people, trying to engage people, just has a lot of important influence in, people like me. So those two, I think, is a start. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's all kinds of people out there who are doing things on the ground, which might be a different answer altogether, but I'm going to stay away from that for now.
Right. So let's hear about them.
I think I have one man who is the board of trustees of my company. He's called Dr. Moses Sam. I think he mentored me when I was very young, going to school from undergraduate to studying conservation, all of that.
Oh, difficult. Recommend
Jane Goodall.
Say E.O. Wilson.
Our governor of Jeju province, because he has really vicious goal for by 2030. So he would like our whole island to be carbon free.
A guy that I look up to, his name is Peter Zinger, and he taught me about veganism and how we need to be more plant-based. And I truly believe that if we have a plant-based mindset and we all understand farming and biodiversity better, this world will be a better place and there will be less hunger issues in the world.
Geoffroy Mauvais, un de mes enseignants.
I think in Azerbaijan we have such good conservationists from Soviet time. Also now we have some good professionals from our ministry, but how to say, I couldn't say just somebody who is very best in this, who is the best.
It's a tough one too. Jane Goodall.
I think I have too many to name. There's just so many great people out there doing a good job. I'm besides the ocean, I love music, so I'm a big Jack Johnson fan.
Scientifically, I love Ulas Karant, because tiger guru, everybody look up at him. From a new approach, I like this TNC guy. I forgot his name. The TNC chief scientist, which I forgot now.
I don't have one. I like them all. I respect them all very much.
Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, and many others that I don't know.
Our leader is Sedo Yutaka, SDCC leader and famous Okinawa musician and Jingon conservator.
Well, some of the indigenous elders that I have met in my journey, and who some of them are no more, but I learned science, but it's because of these indigenous people that I came to want to work on science.
John Goodall.
Okay, so just like our experience with our meetings with primatologists, Jane is definitely one of the most spoken about here as well. Maybe not surprising when you think conservation, when you think activism, those things together, you probably do think Jane Goodall, and she's that much of a household name, like almost nobody else.
That was funny. You would ask the question to those people, like, what's your favorite conservationist? And then they would start thinking, Jane Goodall.
Did I pass the test?
Yeah. But those famous conservationists, I think their work is also critical to be able to highlight places and species who need the most conservation measures or actions to be taken. Which actually leads to my next question to the delegates, which was, what's, to your opinion, the most urgent place and or species to preserve?
Sounds like a really hard question.
It is. It's a tricky one.
I think so, yeah.
What would be your answer?
God, I mean, I think there's a couple ways to think about the question. One is that, in many cases, there may be some places that you would think are in the most dire straits or the most dire conditions in terms of on a very short time scale, you might see them disappear or the species disappear. But the real question is whether or not that's where your resources want or need to go. So I think that's maybe one of the trickiest parts of this question. As a Canadian and as somebody who's very familiar with polar-esque regions in the world, I think one of the most striking, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, the most striking places where the effects of our human activities are, among the most noticeable are the polar regions. So we hear a lot now about the plight of the polar bear, for example. That's really, again, this charismatic megafauna might have a bit of a bias in our perspective on those kinds of things. And frankly, there aren't that many people up there. So the direct impacts that people are having is a lot smaller than the indirect impacts we're having from our daily existence. But that's definitely something that every single person should be thinking about so that we can, try and stop or at least slow down what's going on up there, and same in Antarctica as well. But I really don't know how to answer the question.
No, but well, my question is, it's completely criticizable.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so what? Okay. So what? How did you tackle that one?
I would just give an example because, of course, I'm not able myself to answer this question. But perhaps the last primary forests in Central Africa and in Amazonia as well for the places. And then just to raise awareness about this disappearing species is the Asiatic cheetahs. The last are in Iran, and they are just basically disappearing. They are like critically endangered.
Sure.
It's very hard to estimate the population.
Yeah.
They estimate about in the wild 50 left.
Right.
So
okay.
Yep.
So let's get down to the Asiatic cheetah here. Okay.
Yeah, that's the time. But it's time also to hear about other places and species.
Henoko Oura Bay, east seashore of Okinawa Island in Japan.
Indonesia.
The Northwestern Ghats and pangolin.
Les forêts d'Afrique centrale et le braconnage, donc les espèces de faune telles que le gorille, les éléphants, sujettes aujourd'hui, victimes de braconnage aujourd'hui.
For Hawaii, I would say preserving our water resources, our rainforests.
Now the gorillas.
Cats. First is the cats, because like in Azerbaijan, we have only 8 leopards. We try to protect them, but due to some problems, it's not so easy. Also, as I know, in Russia, there's a problem with protection of Siberian tigers. So, for me, first as a species is the cats.
They all are. Again, super hard to choose. I can't pick one.
Tiger.
The ocean.
Right here in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Well, that's kind of why I came here, because I don't actually know that much about it, and I'm just wanting to learn. I just pick up what's in the news, pieces here and there. But I feel like our water is so important, and we definitely need to preserve our coastline.
Ghana, Atiwa Forest, which provide water to about 5 million people, but it's also under threat from mining and illegal logging.
I know there are a lot of them are getting like extinct. I know, but I don't really know about like much about other world or the parts of the world. However, in our province, Jeju province, we are like extinct species. I know there are like protected animals in Jeju. There are, I don't know.
All the natural landscape, not one over the other. Species thrive in different areas and different landscapes. You can't say one's more important than the other. You have to protect as much as you can and conserve as much as you can and protect the entire landscape.
Hawaii, of course.
So this seem to be far distant places and species to preserve or to actually do something.
It's a lot to think about for sure.
Yeah. But there are things that everybody can do at a personal or individual level.
Right.
That would make eventually a collective movement. So I'm very curious to know what's your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
So my question to the delegates was, what is your sustainability tip? Something you personally do on a daily or routine basis, and that you think is contributing or at least not having a negative impact on the environment. And I was very curious to ask this question because even in conservation congresses, of course, you can see sometimes discrepancy between what people are saying and with their action.
Yeah.
That's easy to see at parties, for example,
when
or
someone's
other
watching,
kind of social events.
Yeah. I'm always very careful when I'm around you. What's going to end up on a podcast?
Right, not after a few glasses. Okay.
Well, and it reminds me of the last podcast we did because we talked about the air conditioning situation at the primatology conference. And I was in the States and it was so cold. I mean, it's typical in North America that people have their thermostats set down so low in the summer when it could be 30 plus degrees. That's centigrade for the Americans.
In Hawaii, it was a bit less cold than it was for this Congress in Chicago, but still, like, not all the rooms, but some rooms, like, were just freezing inside. So,
yeah. It's, in a way, it's funny. It's the reverse in Japan. Say what you want about the way people live here and the consumerism here, but one thing that's always a bit tough to adjust to is how insulation's not a huge thing here. So people are very accustomed to kind of living with the seasons. And in a way, a lot of the architecture, a lot of the lifestyle is living with the seasons as well. And so that means that in the winter in your house, you're cold, colder than you might be outside. In the summer, you're hot. And so that, I think it translates into one of the things that I would mention is just not overly regulating the temperature indoors for sure. So it's something that I have to say that since we had small children, it's changed a little bit. We have to keep the temperature a little bit more hospitable for them. But, we try definitely not to keep the thermostats at any kind of crazy levels. So compared to what it would have been at my sister's house or in Chicago, like 20 degrees or something, we're usually around 27, 28 or something. So it's livable in the summer. And then, of course, in the winter, it would be something similar, but on the lower end of that, room temperature. So, I mean, you can do things like just put an extra sweater on if you're cold inside or take an extra layer off inside if you need to. What else? I don't know. We recently bought a new car, which I don't drive to work as often as I can avoid it. Today it's raining a lot, so I did have my wife drop me off. But we carpooled in that sense, 4 of us. But the car happens to be diesel. And so these days that makes a difference. It's comparable to the modern hybrids as well in terms of efficiency and emissions and things like that. So So those are some things. And the other thing about Japan, which I like, it's a bit complicated to get used to, is the waste management system. So we have something like 7 different ways of sorting the garbages, and so we definitely try and be as diligent as possible to make sure that everything's going in the right. And then if it's reusable plastics or whatever, we'll reuse it. But those kind of things, I very simple things. I can't claim to be. I do a podcast, which I hope has some small influence on, but that's not a regular kind of everyday thing. So those are the kind of things that, at least I hope, show that it's on my mind. Mm-hmm. How much of a difference it makes. We'll see. Okay. Shut your lights off. Good. But now you've got a lot more, so go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I got a lot more. On a daily basis, at least. I would say, besides brushing my teeth only once a year.
Okay. And for those of you listening, can't tell at all.
No, completely irrelevant. And I'm not, by the way. But I think my sustainability tip would be to fight ignorance, or to bring more knowledge of our consciousness. I think it's just that lots of people are liking this and they are just not conscious about their actions. Mm-hmm. They just don't think about it. Mm-hmm. And we'll hear about one of the delegates from India who would say, I think before I consume. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very relevant answer. So that's also what I'm doing for any resource or energy taken. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I'm not saying I'm using them all, but at least I'm thinking about it when I make a choice, and I know what I'm doing. So in this sense, I'm trying to restrict.
I like it. That's
whatever resources I'm using.
You present a system, which is a great answer, whereas I just went on this rambling thing about stupid little mini things.
No, but that's exactly this. So like heating system, air conditioner, lights, plastic, water. I don't know. You always have the choice, and it's not because you are living in a society or in a country where some unsustainable things are the norm that you have to accept them. It's not because, I don't know, maybe we're going back to this plastic bag issue, but because you are living in a country where they will give you a bag at the end of anything you are buying, which is already wrapped into plastic or whatever, and they put it directly into a plastic bag that you have to accept it. You always have to choose to say no. I don't need it, or to bring your own bag.
And I remember going with you. You take too many plastic bags. So now it's the first thing I think of is like, I don't need it. I don't need that bag. No, just put it away. Put it away.
Yeah, but then you can apply this concept to everything. Do I need it? No. Do I need to be freezing in this room in the middle of the summer? No. So anyway, yeah.
If you're sitting in a conference, the answer is yes, because there's not much you can do about it. But
well, let's see. Let's see about this next conference I'm co-organizing in London in 2017. No way there's going to be an aircon in that, so get prepared. Anyway, so that's our take on this answer, and let's see what people out there in Hawaii at the IUCN Congress said.
Eating less meat.
Recycling. Division of the things you throw away, and the care of the materials you use.
Public transportation.
So I try to do like less plastic, like everybody else, and no child, but that's like full hearts, isn't it? So probably like less breeding for human.
My work engages a lot of young kids, bringing them up to also appreciate nature and also to live with nature and also work for nature. So for me, if there's anything I want to do now, is to invest more in the youth.
That's a good question. Well, I try to reuse things in my home. If I have a plastic bag, I try to use it for my trash can and use it for different things before I throw it out. So probably just things I buy, I try to use at home a lot.
It's to develop biodiversity-based enterprises at local level and build capacity.
Éviter de laisser traîner des saletés. Toujours tout collecter, mettre dans un sachet et séparer ce qui peut faire de la matière organique des plastiques.
I'm environmentalist, and from the other side, I'm lawyer. So for me, to get the sustainability, environmental sustainability in Azerbaijan, first of all, our legislation should be improved. Also, I think that in worldwide, there is need on improving or strengthening the legislation on environmental sphere, because it's quite important.
I think that my career has been, I worked for the National Outdoor Leadership School, and my whole premise of working in that job was providing the opportunity for young people to experience wilderness. And we would take them out into wilderness areas on expeditions for a month at a time.
Primary sustainability tip would be, again, looking at a landscape conservation method, not simply one area or one area to focus on. When you're looking at restoration and conservation, it's taking the broad approach and a holistic approach towards conservation.
What is it called? Like you throw recycle. Yes. I think recycling is something that I can do from my level, because I'm not like policymakers or anything, but that is something that I can do as a citizen, and if we all do it, it'll create a lot of better, positive results.
My involvement with fish ponds, with planting of some of our koa trees on the Big Island, that's probably the biggest thing that allows me to give back.
Dugong eat only seagrass, so we protect seagrass bed in seashore in Okinawa. And Henoko, Ora Bay have a very rich biodiversity, not only dugong, perhaps 5,060 marine species include 230 endangered species included. So we protect biodiversity all the way, but now U.S. big marine-based construction plan now planning. So we demand to Japanese government stop this plan.
I do not waste anything. Every time I eat a vegetable, I plant the seed. I do biodiverse gardening via all the vegetables I get from the farmer's market. I rode my bicycle to every day of this convention.
I think before I consume, and I think consumerism and the rising consumption pattern has really been what has driven the world to unsustainable lives.
So hearing about all those diverse sustainability tips is, I think, what makes the IUCN World Conservation Congress a great platform to be able to interact with those people, but also to get new ideas for conservation.
It's such a small number of people that you managed to get, large for us, but small in terms of the 10,000 that were there. So I just imagine how many ideas were floating around the place, but...
Yeah, a few percentage only. And actually, I mean, this led to the final question as well, which was, what's the best part of the IUCN World Conservation Congress? What was it for them?
And fortunately, you get to lead into it.
Oh, yeah, you were not there.
I wasn't there, sorry. The best part for me was, as soon as this is up, hearing it through the PrimateCast Conservation Voices. For sure.
I think the best part for me, as it was also my first IUCN World Conservation Congress, not my first conservation conference, for sure now, but so the first part of the Congress was dedicated to roundtables, workshops, and keynote speech as well, which was great and inspiring, but at the same time, somehow a bit repetitive, I think. Some attendees need to be there to get inspired, but at least it wasn't my take. So I really enjoyed also the second part of the Congress, which was the Members' Assembly, and which gives you an idea of how decision-making at such level toward conservation actions
Right.
and issues is taken. So this was very interesting to see how the motions are proposed and how they are voted, and to see how the different countries and groups are proposing and elaborating on the proposal as well.
So I mean, it's probably cliche now to say, but probably very true at that level, that conservation is politics. And so for someone like you who's very active and wants to continue and expand in your activism, can you see now, after being at like an IUCN, how you kind of make that transition? Or, I mean, I guess the question is really about going from smaller scale activities, which are also, just as important, to the larger scale kind of international body level of conservation.
Decision making level, yeah. Yeah, that's, to be honest, that's highly diplomatic, highly political as well. But I was still positively surprised that you feel the passion and the action is there in their words, but in also in what they are doing. And even at such level, hopefully you would find such persons as well, which gives me hope that it's possible. But now it's time to hear about the passion of the people we interviewed.
It's the networking opportunities, and you learn a lot from meeting the experts from those respective fields.
I think it's so neat. There's so many people from different countries. That's what I love most about this. It's just seeing all the whole world comes together on one issue, because it is our planet. So I love that.
Personnellement, je pense que c'était de rencontrer beaucoup de personnes qui ont le même objectif et qui, bien sûr, prennent des chemins parfois différents. Et du coup, c'était très inspirant de pouvoir partager sur les différents sujets qui tournent autour de la conservation.
The US Pavilion?
I think this is a great session that brings together important thinkers, minds, ideas all coming together that help protect and preserve and conserve our natural landscape. And in a forum such as this, it's a wonderful opportunity to hear different ideas, themes, and approaches, and all come together under one roof.
The agreements, although the inspiration for young people to continue this kind of activities.
I think it was just meeting a lot of people and getting to listen to other people's concerns and views, what's happening in their countries, not just here since I'm from Hawaii, but getting to meet people and finding out what's important to them and what kind of issues they're dealing with wherever they come from.
It's a rewarding feeling to see thousands of conservationists working in all different aspects of conservation. But we actually aspire to the same goal. So it's really not only fun, but eye-opening to see all of these different aspects of conservation. Like I come a lot to the business part of conservation, which I never touched, and learned a lot about it.
The best part of the IUCN Congress was meeting Olivia Malin and Claire Warmenball were the best part of the IUCN Congress. They both need to get promotions. You guys need to set up an IUCN Congress center in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and I would work for them for free.
Words included in conservation happened because this Congress happened in Hawaii.
This exhibition is quite important, quite interesting, because I am from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan located 15,000 kilometers from there. So I am now here, and I saw many booths, many from other countries, from other cultures. For me, it was very interesting. For example, to get to the booths of the Koreans and or the Philippines, and to some pavilions.
The fact that it's here in Hawaii. Yeah.
I was in a session that had to do with illegal trafficking, wildlife trafficking, and for me, it's good to know that there is a global drive and action to address the issue. And the fact that it came up here, it was also up in the motions. And to the extent that we are looking at trees, we are looking at fauna and all of that together, for me was very significant for me. Because in my country we are battling with the exploitation, illegal exploitation, and very large volumes from very fragile landscapes of rosewood species. It's a kind of tropical wood, hardwood, which is found in the most fragile parts of the country, but it's been exploited, driven by Asian markets.
I would say like getting to know other different parts of the world, what they're doing and how they're doing, and just getting to know these people and the organizations.
Ce que j'ai beaucoup aimé, c'est les communications qui nous informent des tendances évolutives, aussi bien des écosystèmes que des espèces, et puis des dispositions qui sont censées être prises par la communauté tant locale qu'internationale pour prévenir les risques et les limiter davantage.
The children.
So the networking part here seemed to be a big component of the Congress, as we can expect.
Sure.
And yes, perhaps one might think that it's not easy to network with people when you have like about 10,000 people walking around you. But at least I had a good pretext to approach them, which was the PrimateCast.
Yeah, the podcast for sure. And you were pretty active.
I mean, I'm very happy to have my handy recorder with me because that really gives me like a pretext, you know. So I'm here to talk to you, but that's for the PrimateCast.
Yes. Noble causes, of course.
Sure. And in our very next coming podcast, I think in a few days, it's almost ready, just after this IUCN World Conservation Congress, just 2 weeks after, was held, as we mentioned, the COP17 in Johannesburg. And I wanted to follow up on this issue of the closure of ivory markets, as we are here in Japan. And with a fellow who is studying actually Asian elephants, we found out that there was this global march organized for elephants and rhinos that are usually held every year. And this year they decided to launch it just the day before the COP17 was taking place in Johannesburg. And it was held in 130 cities around the world, and we just found out that one was taking place in Tokyo. So we're in Kyoto and we say,
hop the Shinkansen.
Let's go. Yeah, we are very curious to see who is organizing that. And
yeah. So we look forward to all of these cool podcasts coming out in the next few weeks then.
Great.
Awesome. So I have one on the spot question for you, Cecile, on the heels of IUCN 2016. Yeah, maybe I won't make it as dramatic as that.
Okay.
But just can you give me a sense of one thing, all right, one thing that's going to stick with you that you learned at IUCN 2016 in Hawaii?
Something that would stick with me is like, so that's how it works.
Cool. Well, how stuff works is a really good way to put it, because I think we're always learning how stuff works for sure throughout all of our lives, but never as apparent as when we're kids. And I think you wanted to say something about the kids at this conference as well.
Right. Yeah. Education, conservation education is like one of the most important, I think, hope for conservation as well. I remember also those giants like E.O. Wilson, Jane Goodall, and Sylvia Earle talking and say, well, they didn't phrase it like this, but we are the dinosaurs of conservation. But now there is this new generation that will have to take care or to follow up with what we have been initiating. And that's something that apparently was also important to the Congress or to the organizers, as they opened their doors to students in Honolulu. So I remember one day I was in the exhibit hall trying to do my podcast interviews, and that was clearly not the day to do so, as there were like thousands of teenagers.
Teenagers maybe not. I was thinking kids' voices in the background. Sounds quaint.
But hopefully, they also learned lots of things. So there were those schools present, but also, of course, like attenders and parents at the same time who brought their kids to the conference. As we will hear in the last and next segment of this IUCN World Conservation Congress. So what's your name?
Alaya.
Where are you from?
Hawaii.
What are you doing?
Keeping the ocean safe.
What's your favorite animal?
Seahorse.
What's your favorite place in the world?
California.
What did you like the most here?
The ocean.
You have been listening to the PrimateCast, a podcast series dedicated to the study and conservation of primates around the world. brought to you by the Centre for International Collaboration and Advanced Studies in Primatology of the Primate Research Institute of Kyoto University. Visit us online at www.cisasp.pu.ac.jp/news/podcasts and follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/thePrimateCast and on Twitter at thePrimateCast.